Today we're starting chapter 4 and we're going to be looking at exponents. And so before we started, I wanted to begin by sorting out the difference between what we have here on the left side and what we have here on the right side. So on the left side, you guys can see I have 2x plus x. And so from what we know about collecting like terms, what that means is if I had a little box here, let's not use that kind of box. If I had a box here, okay, and if I had two x's already and I want to add one more x in that box, how many x's total do I have? I have 3 x's. Okay, whereas here what this is saying is this is our introduction to exponents. We basically have two terms that we're multiplying together. So a big difference is that this is adding things together, this is multiplying. And our rule when we multiply terms is we need to look at the exponent. And so when there's no exponent written, we assume it's a 1. Okay? And when we multiply things that have the same, we call it a base, the big number, or the big letter. When we have multiply things that have the same base, we keep the base and then add the exponents. So in this case, we have x squared. Okay? And so the generic way of looking at exponents is looking at it like this, where if we had a base number with some exponent n at the top, basically the n tells us how many times we're going to multiply the base number together. So we could just keep going depending on what that number is, okay? So in this case, let's say I gave you something like x to the third. What that would mean is I want you to take this x, the big number, and multiply it 3 times. And that makes sense if we work backwards, because remember, when there's no exponent written, we assume it's 1. So if we work backwards, we keep these bases, since they're all the same. Add the exponents 1, 2, 3, and there we go. Okay, so let's say I had something like this just to help you with the exponents here now. Let's start a new one here. So let's say I had something like this. If I started with 6 to the 1, that would mean 6 to the 1 means just multiply 6 by itself. There you go. 6 squared means I'm going to multiply 6 2 times. 6 to the third, you're going to multiply 6 3 times, and so forth, okay? And so the same rules apply even when we just have variables. So if I had y squared, that would mean y times y. If I had y to the third, y times y times y. If I have y to the fourth, how many y's am I going to be multiplying together? 4 of them. Okay, so that's how you could tell. So remember, if you get anything to the 1, it's just itself. So anything to the 1 is itself, okay? But we have a special rule that if we have something to the 0, like 6 to the 0, it's always 1. So anything to the 0 always gives you 1. The only exception is when you have 0 to the 0, and it doesn't exist. Okay? So anything to the 0, you get 1. But if you get a 0 to the 0, that doesn't exist. And then if you have anything to the 1, it's itself. So let's look at some sample problems to help us try and understand a little bit what I've been talking about in regards to exponents. And so the directions for this first set of problems for 1 through 3 is to write each expression in exponential form. So basically I give you something that looks like this, an expression that looks like this, and we want to turn it into something that has an exponent. Okay, so as I told you, basically what our exponent consists of is it consists of base number or a base numbers, and the little number on the top is the exponent telling us how many of a kind we're multiplying together. So in number 1 we have all sixes. So our base number for sure is going to be a 6, okay, because that's what we have is a 6. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them being multiplied together. So we say that that's 6 to the 5th. Looking at number 2, there should be a little multiply in between here. I have all A's, so my base number is going to be A. And let's see how many A's I'm multiplying together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this becomes A to the 7th. Now number 3, I mixed it up. There's numbers, there's 2 different letters, so I'm going to show you how to attack this and simplify this. Let me X this guy out because we don't need that. So the first thing we're going to do is when you have a mix like this, we're going to put all the numbers together. So remember, the point of this is we're just multiplying things. So here's my number. Here's a number, -2, and I'm going to multiply to the other number, which is 3. So multiply the numbers together. -2 times 3 is -6. And then we're going to look at the next letter, the first letter that comes first in the alphabet. So P comes before Q in the alphabet. So I have a 1P here, and I have another P here, and I have a third P at the end. So this will tell me that I definitely have a P as a base number, but we just treat it like we did in 1 and 2. So how many P's am I multiplying together? I have 1, 2, 3, so this becomes P to the 3rd. And let me take care of the Q's now. I have 1 Q, and I have 2 Q's, okay? So I take the Q as a base number, and then I have 1, 2 of them being multiplied together. So that's how that one looks, okay? So if you have a mix like this, multiply the numbers together first, which is what we did with -6. Then when you have an array of numbers, like an array of letters like this, pick the letter that comes first in the alphabet and start with that one. So in this case it was P, and we had 3 of them, so that's why it's P to the 3rd, or we call it P cubed. And Q, we have 2 of them. Okay, so another shorthand for you guys is squared. We use in math means when we have something to the 2nd, and cubed is when we have something to the 3rd. Okay, so squared is for 2, cubed is for 3. Let's look at this find the area, which is actually going to be our number 4. And remember, we did this a little while ago, where you guys told me to find the area. You just take the length times the width. And now, since you guys are kind of exponent friendly now, we can do this a little bit better here. So I have length times width would be 2y times 5y. Okay. So I have a mix of numbers and letters, so do the numbers first. 2 times 5 is 10. Then I have the y's, so keep the y as a base. And then we have one y and another y being multiplied together. There's 2 of them. So this becomes 10y squared. The last thing, or actually second to last thing I want to show you is simplifying. And so I put 4 problems here, 5, 6, 7, 8, and they look kind of similar, like 5 and 6 look similar, and 7 and 8 look similar. And so I just want to show you what the difference are between those two. So in number 5 I have -3, and that's being squared. And so what that looks like is it's telling me that I have, how many -3's am I going to be multiplying together? I'm going to be multiplying together 2, right? Because I have a 2 right there. So this is telling me it's going to be -3 times -3. And if I have 2 negatives, I know from a few lessons ago that that's going to turn into a positive. So this turns into -9. Or +9, I'm sorry. Okay? Whereas in number 6, do you see how the 3 is not in a parenthesis? So what it's telling you to do is it's telling you to assume, so look at the difference between 5 and 6. So 5, the -3 is in a parenthesis, 6 it's not. And so what the difference is here is it's basically telling you to leave the negative on the outside and figure out what this is. what the 3 squared is. So 3 squared is taking two 3's and multiplying them together to get 9, and then we drop this negative all the way down to the bottom. Okay, so the difference in this one is that the negative is attached to the 3, and they show us that by putting it into a parenthesis. And then here, what they do is they have the negative on the outside with the 3 being just squared, not the negative. Okay. In number 7, same kind of idea here. In the parenthesis, what they want us to do is work out the parenthesis first. So 7 minus 3 is 4, and I drop the squared down. This is telling me to take 4 and multiply it twice to get 16. Okay. In this one, what's the difference here? Do I have to square every single thing in? Do I have to square the parenthesis or 7 minus 3? All they want me to square is just this 3 squared, which I know is 9. 7 minus 9 is negative 2. Now my last one I want to deal with. Evaluate. So remember, evaluate is just a fancy word for substitute. So wherever I see an R, I'm going to plug in a 2. And wherever I see an S, I'm going to plug in negative 4. So here we go. 3 times I see an R, I'm going to replace it with a 2. Plus 2, I see an S, so I'm going to replace it with a negative 4. And we're going to put a square on the outside. Remember, order of operations, work inside first. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. Okay. So I have this combination. Remember, it's just going to give me a negative, so what I really have is 6 minus 8 squared. Inside the parenthesis, I have negative 2. And then remember, this tells me to take negative 2 times negative 2, which is 4, and then square it, which is 16. Okay. And so here are some common mistakes that I have seen teaching this algebra course before. Okay, so some things I see is we are really quick to try and finish these problems. So what will happen is we'll see something like this. 5 squared, what we should be doing is 5 times 5, which is 25. But what people will do is they'll take this and they'll see 5 squared, and then they'll tell me that the answer is 10. And that's not true, right? Because 10 would mean that we would have to have 5 plus 5. So remember, that's a big no-no. We do not want to do that. So be careful and make sure that you're multiplying and not adding them. Because when we're in a rush, that's usually the common mistake. Okay. So hopefully this cleared up some questions. You learned something. Please write down anything you need to discuss tomorrow. And don't forget to take the quiz.